The first ships came in silence, vast shapes blotting out the stars as they descended through the upper atmosphere. They moved with a cold, deliberate precision, each vessel guided by minds that had long ago abandoned the need for fear or haste. The Carthoon Armada had come to make an example of this small blue planet, an outlier world they had marked as unworthy of existence. The Council had declared it Deathworld 7, uninhabitable for civilized species, and so they would burn it clean and move on. The planet's defenders, if there were any, would be swept aside like dust before a storm. From orbit, the Carthoon commanders observed the planet's surface with detached fascination. Oceans of toxic saltwater, unpredictable weather systems, vast stretches of land filled with predatory creatures that would have shredded a Carthoon soldier in moments. Even the vegetation, by their analysis, was hostile, bristling with poisons, thorns, and spores that could kill a platoon within hours. Yet somehow, against all logic, this planet had birthed intelligent life. Not just life, but life that had reached the stars. The commanders couldn't comprehend it. Their records said these humans had once fought among themselves, using crude projectile weapons and nuclear fire. They should have perished long ago. But reports suggested the species still endured. Scattered remnants, perhaps, hiding among the ruins of their own reckless history. The Carthoon would confirm extinction today. The invasion began at dawn over the northern continent. Atmospheric carriers broke through the clouds like falling suns, their engines carving golden scars across the sky. Below, forests trembled under the shock waves. Metallic pods the size of houses crashed into the earth, splitting open to release armored troops, drones, and walking siege engines. The ground burned wherever they stepped. Their mission was simple: locate any surviving resistance, erase it, and prepare the planet for reclamation. For the first few hours, resistance was non-existent. The Carthoon forces swept through abandoned towns and hollowed cities, their scanners detecting only the faint echoes of once thriving civilizations. Roads were cracked and overgrown. The bones of machines lay rusting in fields. Yet there was something unsettling in the silence. The planet's data signals were dead, but their communications occasionally flickered with interference. Bursts of static, strange coded frequencies that seemed to whisper through their headsets. At first, the commanders dismissed it as atmospheric corruption, but the longer they stayed, the more the interference grew. By the third day, a single name began to repeat through the static: Elias. It came in distorted bursts, sometimes clear, sometimes fragmented, but always human. The aliens had no translation for it, and the soldiers began to grow uneasy. Carthoon did not believe in superstition, but their species had evolved on worlds of perfect logic, where weather and biology obeyed predictable laws. Here, everything felt alive in the wrong way, the air heavy, the light shifting strangely through the clouds. And then there were the tracks. At first they thought it was a beast, something native and dangerous enough to tear through reinforced plating. But the footprints were unmistakably humanoid, spaced evenly, heavy enough to sink into rock. A lone signature walking toward them, never away. Lieutenant Varkul was the first to encounter him. His patrol unit had been stationed near the ruins of what once was a human settlement, a ghostly cluster of collapsed towers wrapped in ivy and steel cables. His scanners picked up a movement reading just beyond the ridge. Thinking it a stray survivor, Varkul ordered his unit to advance. The figure came into view through the smoke and light rain, a tall shape, unarmored, walking slowly down the broken road. No weapon raised, no armor shining, just a long, dark coat that whipped with the wind. The human carried something slung across his back, an old rifle by the look of it, but ancient, rusted, useless against modern tech. Varkul's translator blinked on. "Unidentified human, surrender for processing," the alien barked. The figure didn't stop. His pace was calm, steady, almost careless. The alien raised his plasma rifle. "This is your only—" The rest of the sentence was drowned in thunder. Not real thunder, something else. Something mechanical and alive. The next instant, Varkul's visor went white. His HUD failed. When it cleared, half his squad was gone, torn apart as though the air itself had ripped through them. The human stood exactly where he had been, smoke curling from the barrel of that ancient rifle that should not have fired at all. Varkul screamed an order and opened fire. Plasma bolts shredded the street, melted walls, tore through the fog, but none of them touched the man. He moved through the chaos like a ghost, each step deliberate, each shot a death sentence. The aliens had trained for every kind of warfare, urban, chemical, psionic, but not this. Not a single creature that could kill with a relic weapon, as if physics bent for him alone. When the last alien fell, the human stopped, reloaded with slow precision, and looked up at the carrier ship hovering above the ruins. His eyes, bright, pale, almost silver, met the ship's viewing sensors directly. The recording, later recovered by the Carthun fleet, showed him smiling. That was the first confirmed contact with the Deathworlder. Word spread quickly through the ranks. At first, the officers dismissed the story as panic or sensor failure. But when the next platoon vanished in the same region, leaving behind nothing but twisted wreckage and scorch marks shaped like footsteps, even the commanders grew cautious. Reinforcements were called in. Thousands of troops, armored walkers, aerial drones. They spread across the valley like an iron tide, sweeping through the fog. They expected an army, or at least a fortified base. They found only silence. And then the whispers began again. Elias! By nightfall, the alien soldiers refused to remove their helmets. The air outside was too still, too thick. Their instruments recorded faint seismic activity, rhythmic, like footsteps. Every few hours, an outpost would lose contact. When squads arrived to investigate, they found the ground scorched, the air humming with residual energy. The Carthun engineers said it wasn't plasma or radiation. It was kinetic, as if something had hit the world hard enough to shake it apart. From orbit, Fleet Commander Drak-Zul watched the readings and grew uneasy. He had fought across 27 campaigns, seen planets burn and species erased. But this was different. The humans were supposed to be primitive. There should have been none left with the ability to fight, let alone strike down whole platoons without being seen. He ordered orbital scans of the region, but the results came back scrambled. Something was interfering with their sensors, something moving faster than their systems could track. On the ground, the human known as Elias kept walking. He didn't think of himself as a soldier anymore. The wars of his kind were long done. He had buried too many brothers in too many nameless fields. When the sky burned again, he knew it wasn't human fire this time. He had watched the alien ships come, cold and arrogant, believing they would conquer just another dying world. They didn't understand what Earth was. They never did. This was a planet that killed the weak and sharpened the strong. Every creature that survived here learned to endure, to adapt, to strike when cornered. Humanity had simply taken that instinct to perfection. Elias was its last echo. He had found the old weapon in a bunker deep under the mountains, where forgotten machines still hummed in the dark. It wasn't a rifle in the ordinary sense. It was a relic from the last human wars, rebuilt and fused with technologies scavenged from fallen ships. The weapon bonded to his pulse, reading his intent, bending physics to obey it. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. Against the Carthun, it was poetry. When he reached the alien forward base, he paused on the ridge and watched the glowing camps below. Thousands of tents and armored transports gleamed like insect shells under the stormlight. Their banners fluttered in the wind, proud and bright. Elias exhaled slowly, adjusted the rifle strap on his shoulder, and began the long walk down. Sensors caught him at 0347. Drones were dispatched. The first wave vanished from the feed. The second managed to transmit 3 seconds of footage, just a shadow moving through flashes of lightning, followed by static. Then the alarms began. One by one, energy fields collapsed. Turrets went offline, communications died. The entire valley filled with a low, thunderous sound, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. The Carthun commanders shouted orders. Artillery lit up the ridge, turning night to day. Explosions rolled across the hillsides, flattening everything in their path. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing. No body, no trace. Only the faint impression of footsteps burned into the ground, leading straight into the camp. Elias walked through the ruins calmly. Around him the air shimmered with residual plasma fire, but he barely felt it. He could hear the aliens shouting in their guttural language, their fear breaking through discipline. He didn't hate them, not really. They were just another empire that had mistaken Earth's silence for weakness. They would learn what every invader had learned before. Humanity didn't bow. It buried. When he reached the command tent, the alien officers were already retreating to their ships. Elias stopped at the threshold, rain sliding off his coat, rifle raised loosely at his side. The nearest alien turned and froze. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Elias spoke, his voice low, calm, and terribly human. "You should have stayed in your sky." The rifle cracked once, then again. By dawn, the base was gone. Orbiting satellites recorded a single heat signature standing amid the ashes, staring up into the storm. When the Carthoon fleet reviewed the footage, the fleet commander ordered every ship to full battle readiness. They no longer spoke of extermination. They spoke of containment. But by then it was already too late. The Deathworlder had begun to move again. The fleet's first mistake was believing the Deathworlder was alone, because they could see only one heat signature. The second was assuming he could be contained. In orbit above the scarred continent, hundreds of ships repositioned into a blockade pattern, their hulls glowing with the light of artificial dawn. The commanders calculated firing solutions, mapping energy corridors and atmospheric thresholds. It was all precise, mathematical, perfect, just as it had been for every conquest before. They didn't understand that perfection meant nothing against a man shaped by chaos. Elias was already gone from where they thought he stood. He had vanished into the forest below the mountains, where the air was dense with mist and static, and the ground pulsed with old human secrets. The Carthoon scanners couldn't follow him there. Their machines weren't built to see through the electromagnetic ghosts of Earth's long-dead wars. Radiation storms danced through the canyons like phantoms, frying circuits and distorting signals. What they read as interference was actually history. Remnants of nuclear scars and old war satellites still drifting in decaying orbits. It was a haunted world, and now it had a ghost of its own. The alien ground commanders deployed search divisions in tight formation, thousands of troops moving in synchronized patterns through the fog. They burned forests, collapsed tunnels, vaporized valleys, anywhere a human could hide. But Elias didn't hide. He hunted. The first night, a patrol vanished. The next, a battalion. At first, the losses seemed minor, random, but then the patterns emerged. Communications hubs destroyed, fuel depots detonated, officers found dead with their helmets shattered from within. The Deathworlder was dismantling an army piece by piece, not through overwhelming firepower but through fear. He knew that was what broke armies faster than bullets. By the seventh day, the Carthoon morale began to fracture. They were a species bred for precision and order. Everything about them relied on predictable variables, stable oxygen ratios, calibrated gravity, controlled engagements. Earth gave them none of that. Their armor suits corroded faster in the rain. Their drones malfunctioned from magnetic storms. Even their food rations spoiled when exposed to native bacteria. Elias didn't need to fight every soldier. The planet was already doing it for him. He just made sure to push them where it hurt most. When he struck next, it was at the forward communications relay stationed near the equatorial ridge. The base was heavily fortified, guarded by automated turrets and armored mechs the size of small buildings. The aliens thought it impenetrable. They didn't expect him to walk straight through the storm barrier on foot. The guards on the tower reported a lone figure moving against hurricane winds, lightning crawling across his coat like silver veins. Every weapon trained on him fired at once. Plasma bolts, rail slugs, missiles, all vanished in the wall of wind and thunder that swallowed the ridge. When the storm cleared, the base's reactors were silent. The mechs stood frozen, their circuits fried. Every communication uplink was dead, cables melted like wax. And at the center of the destruction lay a single human footprint, pressed deep into the stone. Fleet Commander Draxul watched the recordings in disbelief. He had fought Deathworld species before, planets where acid seas boiled and predators stalked in the night, but never a creature that turned the planet itself into an ally. His advisors demanded they use orbital bombardment, erase the surface entirely. But the fleet's scanners showed strange distortions. The energy grid around Earth flickered unpredictably, as if something beneath the crust was pulsing with power. The humans had once tapped the planet's magnetic core for weapons research. The data was ancient, incomplete. Now it seemed whatever they'd built was awake again, responding to Elias's presence. Drakzul couldn't risk a full bombardment. It might trigger something catastrophic. The Carthun were conquerors, not suicides. Down on the surface, Elias moved like a shadow through the wild. His clothes were torn, blood soaked his sleeve, but his eyes burned with steady light. He'd learned long ago that fear was a weapon sharper than steel. The aliens were powerful, yes, but they didn't understand pain the way humans did. They didn't grow up in a world where everything tried to kill you every day. They hadn't watched entire cities burn and still found the strength to rebuild. To them, battle was calculation. To him, it was survival. And survival was something Earth had taught its children too well. He followed the valley toward the coast, where the alien carriers had established their main landing zone. It stretched for miles, a city of glass and metal under an artificial shield dome, crawling with soldiers and machines. The sight would have broken any ordinary man, but Elias just smiled faintly and began counting targets. He didn't have an army. He didn't need one. The planet itself was his arsenal. He rigged traps using old-world tech. Mines powered by geothermal vents, magnetic pulses that hijacked alien drones, chemical cocktails brewed from the toxic plants that grew in the marshes. Every step the Carthun took was a gamble. Some didn't even die from his weapons. They died from Earth itself, poisoned by the rain, suffocated by spores, torn apart by beasts that shouldn't have existed in a civilized galaxy. Elias merely gave them directions. When the alien fleets finally detected his position, they sent in their elite, the Praetorians, cybernetically enhanced warriors who had never known defeat. They descended in pods of steel, their armor gleaming like obsidian, eyes burning with crimson light. Elias waited for them at the ruins of an old human city, its skyscrapers leaning like gravestones. He stood at the center of a shattered plaza, the wind tearing through broken glass. The Praetorians surrounded him in perfect formation, their weapons locked and humming. One of them spoke through a translator. "You are alone," it said. "You cannot win." Elias tilted his head, studying the alien with quiet amusement. "You came all this way to tell me that?" The alien raised its weapon. "We are the end of you." Elias's voice was calm. "You're late." Then the ground erupted. The ruins came alive with explosions, walls collapsing inwards as hidden charges ignited. The blast wave rolled through the streets, hurling metal and fire into the sky. In the chaos, Elias moved like a ghost. He appeared behind one alien before it could blink, drove a blade of broken steel through its neck, tore the weapon from another's hand, and fired it point-blank into its chest. The rest retaliated, but their sensors were blind from electromagnetic interference. Their formation broke. He cut through them like a storm, the rifle roaring with impossible energy. When the last one fell, silence settled over the city. Smoke curled around him. The rain hissed on burning metal. Elias looked at the shattered helmet of the last Praetorian and whispered, "End of me, huh?" He dropped the helmet and kept walking. In orbit, Drakzul received the news with disbelief and fury. 12 elite soldiers gone. Hundreds of support drones lost. His advisors begged for retreat, but pride blinded him. "He is one man," the commander growled. "He bleeds. He will die." He ordered the fleet's flagship to descend, personally overseeing the final phase of eradication. They would burn the continent clean, whatever the cost. Elias watched the sky darken with the shadow of the descending ship. It was massive, kilometers long, bristling with weapon arrays that could vaporize cities. He could feel its presence like a storm pressing against his bones. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object, a silver medallion engraved with the emblem of Earth Command. It had belonged to his brother, lost during the final human war. Elias closed his fist around it, whispering something no one else would hear. Then he turned toward the coast. The flagship's engines roared as it broke through the clouds, unleashing a shockwave that leveled everything in its path. Drones flooded the sky. Plasma bolts rained down like falling stars. Elias ran through the inferno, his rifle glowing white-hot, firing until the air itself screamed. He wasn't fighting for victory anymore. He was fighting for memory. For every name carved into a grave no one remembered. For every child who had looked up at the stars and believed they were safe. Humanity had been forgotten by the galaxy, written off as extinct. But extinction had never suited them. They were stubborn, irrational, and endlessly defiant. The Deathworlder was proof of that. The bombardment continued for hours. The aliens reduced forests to glass, rivers to steam, mountains to ash. And still, something moved in the fire. Their scanners couldn't explain it. A single pulse that wouldn't die. A heartbeat that echoed through the static. Drakzul watched in horror as one by one his ships began to lose power. Systems overloaded, engines failed, weapons refused to fire. It was as if the planet itself was rebelling. The energy signatures below matched no known frequency, a chaotic rhythm pulsing from the world's core. Then came the voice through every comm channel, distorted, raw, undeniably human. "You wanted to meet a Deathworlder? Congratulations." The next moment, the fleet's central reactor overloaded. The sky split open in a blossom of white fire. The explosion rippled through the clouds, shaking the ocean below. The flagship descended in flames, tearing across the horizon like a dying sun. From the coast, Elias watched it fall. The blast wind tore through his coat, heat searing his face, but he didn't look away. He watched until the sea swallowed the wreck and the light faded. Then he turned inland, his eyes reflecting the burning sky. Behind him, the world went quiet. Smoke drifted across the blackened shore. The alien fleet was shattered, their surviving ships fleeing into orbit. But Elias knew it wasn't over. They would regroup. They would send more. They always did. He looked down at the medallion in his palm and closed his hand around it again. "One at a time," he murmured. The wind carried his voice into the ruins, into the deep places where the earth still remembered humanity's fury. He began walking again toward the mountains, where the next battle waited unseen. Far above, the last of the Carthun satellites watched his lone figure disappear into the mist. Their systems recorded one final note in their language, a phrase no one aboard the fleeing ships could translate. It read simply, "Deathworlder Ascendant." The Carthun called for reinforcements. Across half the galaxy, their relay beacons flared like red suns, carrying one message to every allied fleet. The conquest of Deathworld 7 had failed. At first, no one believed it. The Carthun were the oldest surviving empire, the architects of 3-star clusters, conquerors of entire species. For them to admit failure was unthinkable. But the data logs were undeniable. Entire divisions erased, fleets crippled, and in every report, the same impossible anomaly. One human. They called him by a dozen names: the Ghost of Terra, the Man of the Storm, the One Who Stood. The name Elias passed between command decks like a curse. And so, to reclaim their pride, they sent another army. The second wave came not as conquerors, but as exterminators. 500,000 troops, battle-forged from across the Carthun worlds, armed with the most advanced weapons their forges could produce. Their ships descended through the atmosphere like burning comets, covering the sky from horizon to horizon. From orbit, Earth looked like it was being swallowed whole. But Elias was already waiting. He had spent weeks preparing, gathering what the planet still had left to give. He knew he couldn't fight numbers like that head-on, not even with the planet's help. But war wasn't about numbers. It was about nerve, endurance, and knowing the ground better than your enemy. He moved through the mountain ranges, reactivating ancient defense satellites buried beneath the crust, drawing power from the magnetic veins of the Earth itself. The remnants of humanity's lost technology responded to him like they recognized his DNA. He wasn't their master, only their last caretaker. The alien landing zones erupted with precision, each carrier setting down in perfect formation across what they thought were empty plains. Their generals issued commands with cold efficiency, spreading armor and infantry across the terrain in an expanding circle meant to crush anything in its path. But the plains weren't empty. They were the grave of a forgotten city buried beneath centuries of earth and dust, filled with the remnants of weapons no one alive remembered. When the aliens' heavy walkers stepped onto the cracked ground, seismic sensors triggered the ancient failsafes. The earth opened its mouth. The buried reactors awoke, their cores igniting in a chain of fire that spread for miles. Whole battalions disappeared into the explosion before they could even scream. The aliens didn't understand what was happening. To them, it was as if the planet itself had turned against them. Their scanners were useless, their maps unreliable. The human world was alive, unpredictable, full of traps laid by a civilization that had once been at war with itself for survival. Elias moved among the chaos like a phantom, striking and vanishing, leading them deeper into the labyrinth of death they couldn't comprehend. Fleet Commander Drax Zul, now scarred and half-mechanical from the first campaign, watched from his flagship in orbit. He could feel his species' shame gnawing at him like acid. He had brought everything this time: battle moons, orbital cannons, siege engines capable of cracking continents. And yet, as reports poured in of losses, of unseen attacks, of fear spreading through the ranks, he felt the same chill he had known in the First War. "One human cannot do this," he hissed to his sub-commanders. But deep down he was no longer sure. The Deathworlder defied logic. He fought like the world itself had chosen him as its instrument. Down below, Elias didn't rest. His body was failing him. Every breath felt heavier, every wound slower to heal. But he had learned long ago that pain was a teacher, not a limit. The more it burned, the sharper his focus became. He knew that the aliens would never stop coming until he made them understand what Earth meant. It wasn't just a world of death. It was a crucible. Every generation of humanity had been tempered by disaster and war, by hunger and cold, by grief so deep it had become part of their bones. The Carthun thought strength was measured in numbers. They had never learned that true strength was surviving alone. He reached the heart of the old human command network, a bunker deep beneath a frozen mountain, sealed since the end of the last human war. The doors opened to his handprint, ancient systems flickering back to life, recognizing his bloodline. Inside, rows of dormant machines waited like slumbering beasts. He found what he needed: a control core linked to the orbital defense grid that once protected Earth before the fall. It was barely functional, its power sources buried under centuries of decay. But Elias didn't need it perfect. He just needed it angry. Outside, the alien armies pressed forward. Their mechs rolled through canyons, their aircraft filled the skies, and the ground trembled under the weight of their machines. They advanced like a tide of metal, crushing everything in their path. But the moment they crossed the mountain's shadow, the sky changed. Clouds swirled unnaturally, lightning gathering in spirals that glowed like veins of molten glass. The aliens looked up, confused. Then the heavens opened. Lances of energy struck down from orbit, old human orbital cannons reawakening for the first time in centuries. They didn't fire with precision anymore. Their guidance systems were ghosts, half-mad from time. But their fury was absolute. Beams of white light tore through the sky, vaporizing ships, shattering formations, boiling lakes into steam. The Carthun ranks disintegrated under the bombardment. Panic spread through their command channels, screams and static replacing orders. Elias stood in the storm, watching it unfold, his coat whipping in the gale, his face lit by firelight. He didn't cheer. He just whispered to the wind, "You had your chance." But even destruction had a cost. The old defense grid wasn't meant to run without human oversight. Its systems began to overload, the orbitals losing control. Fire rained indiscriminately, striking both alien and Earth alike. The sky became a mirror of chaos. Elias knew he couldn't stop it. He had woken something that was beyond him now. So he did the only thing left. He guided it. He rerouted what power he could through the control core, focusing the bombardment on the densest clusters of alien ships. The strain tore through him, his vision blurring, blood seeping from his nose and ears. But he didn't let go. Up in orbit, Drax Zul saw his fleet burning. His rage turned to desperation. He ordered all remaining ships to target the source of the signal, the mountain where Elias stood. Thousands of plasma warheads launched at once, converging on the same point. The sky became a wound of fire. Elias looked up through the swirling clouds and smiled faintly. "Come then," he said. "Let's finish it." The warheads struck the mountain in unison. The explosion could be seen from space. The shockwave leveled everything for miles, turning the snow into glass, the rocks into dust. For a moment, it seemed as though the Deathworlder was gone at last. The aliens cheered through static-filled channels, their commanders exhaling in relief. But the relief didn't last. From the center of the crater, light began to rise. Not fire, not plasma, but something deeper. It pulsed like a heartbeat, slow and heavy. Then the mountain moved. Not the stone itself, but what was beneath it. Something ancient stirred, something older than human civilization, buried and forgotten in the planet's memory. The energy grid Elias had awakened wasn't just a weapon system. It was part of a larger network, a planetary defense construct humanity had never finished, but had accidentally tied into the Earth's magnetic field. It responded to his final command, and now it was awake. Across the planet, lights flared beneath the surface, miles-wide patterns glowing like veins. The seas churned. The sky bent. The magnetic poles roared with auroras so bright they blinded sensors. The alien fleet began to lose navigation, their systems collapsing under the interference. Ships crashed into one another, pilots screaming as gravity betrayed them. From orbit, Drakzul watched his empire unravel in real time. He realized too late that this was not a war. It was a warning. Elias stood in the center of the storm, half buried in ash and glass, his body broken but his eyes still open. Around him, the ground shook with the heartbeat of a living world. He had become part of it now, a conduit, a spark bridging human will and planetary fury. He didn't know how much longer he could hold it, but he knew what he had to do. He whispered into the comm still linked to the orbital grid. "One last favor, old friend." The system responded with a low hum. The orbital cannons, what was left of them, aligned for one final strike, straight into the core of the alien flagship still hovering above the atmosphere. Drakzul saw the energy surge too late. He screamed for his crew to evade, but the sky was already splitting. A beam of pure white energy lanced upward from the mountain, piercing through clouds and armor, through metal and bone. The flagship imploded in silence, its debris scattering like dust. The light spread outward, washing over the fleet, burning their engines, collapsing their reactors. In seconds, the Carthun Armada ceased to exist. When the storm finally faded, the world was quiet again. The fires died, the sky cleared, and all that remained of the invaders were fragments drifting across the horizon. At the heart of the crater, the ground was smooth and glassy, still warm to the touch. There was no sign of Elias. The only thing left was the medallion he'd carried, lying untouched in the ash, its surface engraved with a single human word: home. Far above, the surviving Carthun ships, broken, silent, terrified, drifted away from the ruined planet. They didn't send more armies. They didn't send scouts. They marked Earth as forbidden, its coordinates erased from their charts. And for generations afterward, whenever soldiers whispered about Deathworld 7, they didn't speak of conquest. They spoke of the man who had stood alone against the stars and made them tremble. Deep beneath the surface, under layers of rock and silence, faint lights still pulsed in rhythm with the planet's heart. If one listened closely, there was a whisper in the static carried by the wind. Some said it was just the echo of storms. Others swore it was a human voice, calm and steady, saying the same words again and again, as if to remind the universe that death worlds do not die. They endure. For years, Earth was left alone. The alien empires that once circled it like vultures marked its coordinates with silent dread. The Carthun never spoke of their defeat again, but their veterans bore the memory in their eyes. Those who had seen the storm and survived never fully returned to who they were before. To them, the death world wasn't a place. It was a curse a reminder that something out there could not be conquered by force or technology or arrogance. Yet the universe had a short memory, and pride always grows back. Decades later, the stories began to sound like myth. The alien scholars debated whether the Deathworlder had ever truly existed, or if he was just a phantom conjured by the trauma of defeat. The younger generations laughed at the old war tales. A single human destroyed a fleet? They scoffed. Impossible! The Empire needed its certainty back, and disbelief was the easiest medicine. But there were those who still remembered the transmission. The voice that had whispered through static, the pulse that had shattered their ships, the human eyes staring into the void with quiet fury. The scientists who studied the Carthoon archives discovered something even stranger. Faint residual energy readings still emanating from Earth's magnetic field. Rhythmic, steady, almost like a heartbeat. The readings persisted for decades. Whatever had awakened there was still alive, and it was still watching. On the far edge of known space, a smaller empire, the Zyreth Dominion, took interest. The Zyreth were scavengers of lost technology, opportunists who saw potential where others saw fear. When they learned that the mighty Carthoon had fled from a single world and had never returned, they didn't see danger. They saw untapped power. So they sent a probe. It arrived at Earth silently, a dark speck drifting through the void until it entered orbit. It recorded the planet's atmosphere, the radiation levels, the strange anomalies still flickering across the poles. Then, just before it could transmit its findings, it vanished. The Dominion sent another. That one too disappeared. The third managed to send back one frame of visual data before going dark. A flash of light from the surface, shaped vaguely like a man standing atop a ridge, looking up. The scientists argued for months over whether it was a sensor glitch. But the generals didn't care. They saw it as confirmation. Something was there. Within a year, a Zyreth expeditionary force was dispatched to the Sol system. Unlike the Carthoon, they came prepared for anomalies. They brought adaptive drones, cloaking fields, and null-gravity projectors. They didn't come to conquer, not yet. They came to study, to capture. The fleet entered orbit under silence. Their leader, High Commander Ysera, was cautious but ambitious. She had heard the stories, but she didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in leverage, and if this planet truly housed remnants of ancient human power, she would claim it for the Dominion. The first landing teams touched down on the northern continent, near the ruins of what their maps labeled Scandinavia. The air was thick with frost and static, the ground littered with relics of old battles long turned to dust. Ysera's scientists began their work immediately, scanning the soil, collecting fragments of alien alloy still half-melted into the rock. One of them knelt beside a patch of glassy terrain and brushed the ash aside. Underneath lay a faint indentation, shaped like a footprint. The scientists' instruments began to hum. Energy readings spiked, erratic and alive. The others gathered around, whispering nervously. The footprint wasn't old. It was recent. That night, the camp's perimeter alarms went off. The guards reported movement beyond the ridge, just shadows, fast and silent. Ysera assumed it was atmospheric interference. But then came the screams. The first squad vanished. The second found only their weapons lying in the snow. By dawn, 3 patrols were gone without a trace. Ysera ordered full lockdown, but deep down, she felt it too, the growing, suffocating sense that they were being watched. In the fog of the early morning, one of her lieutenants brought her something found near the southern ridge, an old human rifle, covered in frost but still intact. It bore marks she didn't recognize, strange etchings burned into the metal as if by fire. "It shouldn't exist," her engineer said quietly. "This design predates your archives by centuries." Ysera held it carefully, running a gloved hand over the barrel. "And yet it's warm," she murmured. The others looked at her uneasily. "We should leave," one whispered. "Before—" The voice cut off as the lights flickered. A sound rolled through the air, low, heavy, like a heartbeat amplified through the ground. The snow trembled. The engineers scrambled to shut down their scanners, but it was too late. Something beneath the surface was responding. Lights began to appear under the ice, pale blue veins spreading outward in geometric patterns. The readings on their instruments went wild. Then a voice came through the comms. It wasn't a broadcast. It was inside their helmets, threaded through static, calm and human. "You shouldn't have come." Panic erupted through the camp. Soldiers fired into the mist, their weapons lighting the snow with bursts of energy. But they were shooting at nothing. The sound of footsteps echoed between the mountains, slow, deliberate, unhurried. Ysera shouted orders, trying to regain control, but her words were drowned in the rising storm. The snow turned black with ash. When visibility returned for an instant, they saw him. He stood on the ridge above them, silhouette framed by lightning. The same dark coat, the same impossible stillness. His eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the aurora burning across the sky. Time had not touched him. Elias was still alive. The soldiers froze. For a long moment no one moved. Then Ysera took a step forward, her voice trembling despite herself. "You're human," she said, switching her translator on. "You survived." Elias didn't answer. He only looked down at them, expression unreadable, then said softly, "You shouldn't have come back." His voice wasn't angry, it was weary, like someone who had said those words too many times before. When he turned to leave, one of Ysera's soldiers panicked and fired. The bolt struck the ground near Elias's feet, vaporizing snow. He stopped. The air thickened. The soldiers felt their suits tighten as their internal sensors overloaded. Static roared in their ears. Elias turned back, and the world seemed to tilt. Every weapon in the camp deactivated at once. The energy cells drained in an instant. The humans had left more than technology buried here. They had left something woven into the bones of the earth, and Elias was its last key. He raised one hand, and the snow around the alien soldiers lifted like dust in a rising wind. Ysera fell to her knees as her visor went dark. She could feel the pressure in the air, the hum of energy vibrating through her bones. "Wait," she gasped. "We're not here to fight." Elias regarded her for a long time, his expression softening slightly. Then he spoke, his voice quieter now. "You always say that." The storm fell silent. The snow settled. When the aliens opened their eyes again, Elias was gone. For the next several days, Ysera's team attempted to re-establish contact with orbit. But their transmissions wouldn't leave the atmosphere. The energy field surrounding the planet disrupted everything. At night, strange lights danced across the horizon, and the sound of distant machinery echoed through the valleys. Some of the soldiers began reporting dreams, visions of fire and glass, of cities burning under alien suns. One described seeing Elias standing in those dreams, watching her silently. She woke screaming. Ysera began to understand why the Carthun had fled. The death world wasn't just deadly, it was conscious. It remembered, and now it was awake again. She ordered evacuation, but by then half the landing craft were gone, swallowed by the storms. The few that escaped never made it past orbit. The Zyreth fleet sensors registered a sudden spike of magnetic interference, followed by silence. Their ships drifted, systems failing, their captains screaming through dead channels. Those who survived told of a blinding light rising from the planet's surface, the shape of a man standing at its center. From that day onward, the Zyreth joined the Carthun in their silence. The region of space containing Sol was declared off-limits by every galactic council, not out of treaty or diplomacy, but out of instinct. No one claimed it. No one mapped it. Even automated ships that passed nearby reported malfunctions, systems flickering with strange voices whispering coordinates that led back to the blue planet. On Earth, the winds howled through empty valleys, carrying echoes of battles long past. Beneath the surface, the lights still pulsed faintly, responding to a heartbeat no longer human. Elias had become something more than man, something woven into the fabric of the world he had defended. He was the last will of a species that refused to be forgotten, a guardian forged from solitude and rage and love for a world that had been both cradle and tomb. And far beyond the reach of the Milky Way, where empires whispered about forbidden systems and monsters born from lost civilizations, one truth endured. They could send their armies, their machines, their fleets, but there would always be a Deathworlder waiting, standing against the horizon with the patience of stone and the memory of fire. The years turned into centuries, and still the blue planet hung silent and untouched. The stars shifted, empires rose and fell, but no one dared to claim Sol. Even automated probes that drifted too close either vanished or returned corrupted, their data filled with static and phantom whispers, voices speaking in forgotten human tongues. In the grand halls of alien academies, the story of the Deathworlder became a myth told to frighten ambitious conquerors. Yet, as all myths do, it began to twist with time. Some said he was a god. Others said he was the last soldier of a long-dead race, preserved by the world itself. A few claimed he was still alive, walking the earth in eternal solitude. But the truth, buried deep beneath the ashes of continents, was stranger still. Elias was neither alive nor dead. He had become something in between, something the universe could no longer fully understand. When the Xyrath expedition perished, their distress signals echoed for weeks across subspace, faint and broken. The Council of Concordance, the governing alliance of 8 galactic empires, intercepted fragments of those transmissions. They tried to decrypt them, but every attempt resulted in system malfunctions. The Council debated what to do. For centuries they had maintained the unspoken rule: never return to Earth. But now, the galaxy was changing. The outer systems were collapsing into war, resources were dwindling, and rumors of human artifacts, technologies capable of reshaping matter itself, had begun circulating again. Desperation makes the brave foolish, so the Council broke the old rule. They assembled a coalition force of their finest soldiers, scientists, and ships, an army larger than the one that had once crushed entire civilizations, and sent it toward the Forbidden Star. Their arrival was met not with resistance, but with silence. Earth drifted in quiet orbit, its continents cloaked in storms, its surface unreadable to sensors. The fleet established a perimeter around the planet, keeping their weapons charged and ready. They sent out drones. One by one the drones vanished. Then came the whispers again, soft, rhythmic, too structured to be static. Linguists aboard the Council flagship tried to decode the signal. After hours of analysis, one of them looked up, pale and trembling. "It's a voice," she said quietly. "It's saying, 'Go home.'" The Council generals laughed it off as human superstition. They didn't believe in ghosts, not even the kind that could melt fleets. They ordered the landing. The first wave descended through thick clouds that glowed faintly from within, like a living pulse. Beneath, the ruins of human cities stretched across the landscape. Skyscrapers turned to blackened spires, forests growing through their bones. The soldiers found traces of old battlefields where alien metals were fused to glass, where strange blue crystals jutted from the earth like veins of frozen lightning. They saw human statues half buried in snow, faces eroded yet still defiant. It was as if the planet itself had preserved the memory of what had been. At first, the expedition reported nothing hostile. The air was breathable, the radiation low, the terrain stable. But at night, their equipment began to fail. Their motion sensors picked up shapes moving just beyond sight, tall, humanoid figures of light and dust that vanished when approached. Their communications flickered. The fleet above began losing contact with the surface. A static fog rolled over their command frequencies, whispering the same phrase over and over. "Go home." The fleet commander, Admiral Korath, grew impatient. "If there is truly a being still alive down there," he snarled, "then it's one soldier against 1,000 ships. We will crush him and be done with this curse." His arrogance, like that of the Carthun long before him, sealed their fate. He ordered a full-scale deployment, hundreds of dropships descending at once, streaking like comets through the atmosphere. For a few moments, the sky above Earth burned with their light. Then something answered. A tremor rippled across the planet's magnetic field, powerful enough to disrupt every ship in orbit. The oceans churned, the clouds spiraled, and from deep beneath the crust, a hum began to rise. It was the same pulse that had frightened the Xyrath and silenced the Carthun, a frequency that didn't just disrupt machines, but thought itself. Soldiers on the surface clutched their helmets, screaming as their neural implants overloaded. The Earth was awake again. In the middle of a shattered plain once known as Siberia, the ground split open, and light poured out. It wasn't fire or plasma, but something older, purer, raw energy woven into the soil by human hands long ago. From within that light, a shape began to form. The soldiers saw him step out of the fracture, walking through the storm as if it parted for him. His armor was torn and blackened, his eyes burning with the same impossible calm. Elias had returned, not from death, but from the very essence of the world he had sworn to protect. The soldiers raised their weapons, trembling. He did not speak at first. He simply looked at them, at their alien armor, their trembling hands. Then quietly, almost kindly, he said, "You were warned." The sky darkened. The fleet in orbit tried to lock weapons on his position, but their targeting systems collapsed. The atmosphere distorted like water rippling under pressure, and then Elias moved. To the aliens, it looked like teleportation, but it was faster. An instant shift through reality itself. He appeared among their front lines, unarmed, yet every step he took sent shockwaves through the ground. A single gesture tore their drones apart mid-air, their metal folding in on itself like paper. When they fired, their plasma bolts curved away from him, pulled off course by unseen forces. He wasn't just fighting them, he was fighting the laws of their universe. And he was winning. The battle that followed was not a battle at all. It was a reckoning. Ships fell from orbit like burning meteors, their engines silent. The alien soldiers, once fearless, dropped their weapons and ran, only to find the landscape shifting against them, paths closing where they had been open a moment ago. It was as though the planet itself fought beside him, reshaping to his will. Trees turned to spears. The wind roared with human voices. The rivers boiled with light. The death world was alive, and Elias was its heart. In orbit, Admiral Korath watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated piece by piece. "Fire everything!" he screamed, voice shaking. "I don't care what it takes. End it!" The ships unleashed their entire payloads, missiles, ion cannons, antimatter shells. The night sky over Earth erupted into blinding fire. When the smoke cleared, the continent was gone. Or so they thought. As the flames faded, the scanners showed something impossible. The continent had reformed. The mountains, the rivers, even the ruins of cities. Rebuilt, untouched. Standing at the center of it all was Elias, unchanged. His gaze turned toward the heavens. The last surviving ships tried to flee, but space itself warped around them. Their trajectories bent inward, dragging them back toward the blue planet. Korath's final transmission before his ship vanished was a single line. "It's not a man. It's the world." And so it was. Elias's consciousness had fused with Earth's core centuries ago. He had become its protector, its spirit, the echo of humanity's defiance. Every time a new invader came, the planet remembered, and he awoke to meet them. Not out of hatred, but out of duty. To preserve the memory of a species that refused to be conquered, even after extinction. After the fall of the Council fleet, no empire dared to approach Sol again. The galaxy redrew its maps, marking that region as a singularity of death and mystery. They called it the Silent Heart. Travelers who passed near it sometimes reported strange signals: music, whispers, laughter, fragments of languages no one could translate. Some even claimed to have seen a figure standing on the planet's surface, looking up at the stars. And somewhere, deep within the Earth's molten core, Elias waited. He no longer counted years. He no longer dreamed of company. But sometimes, when meteors streaked through the sky, he would remember the sound of human voices, the warmth of sunlight on skin, the laughter of a world that once was. It didn't hurt anymore. It simply was. One day, far in the future, when new explorers, different from the old empires, finally reached the edge of Sol, they found a quiet world bathed in golden light. They detected no weapons, no hostility, only the steady pulse of a planet at peace. Their leader, a young alien scientist, descended onto the surface. She walked through fields of wildflowers growing among broken monuments and found a single stone at the center of it all. Upon it was carved in ancient Terran script, We were here. We endured. She looked up at the sky and felt a strange calm, as though someone, or something, was watching kindly from afar. The wind carried a faint whisper, too soft to be caught, but warm enough to be understood. It said, "Welcome home." And across the universe, in the stories told by starfarers and wanderers, the legend of the Deathworlder lived on, not as a tale of fear, but of remembrance. They said that the humans, though gone, had left behind the greatest guardian the stars had ever known. They said that when the last battle comes, when the stars themselves begin to die, he would rise again, carrying the fire of a lost world in his hands. The aliens had sent an army, and they had met a single Deathworlder. But what they truly encountered was the soul of humanity itself, endless, unyielding, and eternal.